So last year, I pulled an air layer. Well, I pulled 3 air layers actually. One of them off of this tree. This is my ornamental plum tree. From right there. And I pulled another one off, actually 2 of them off, my little Red Delicious apple tree. Right about there. And somewhere else, but who cares? And I pulled one off of this giant Japanese maple. Might have been right there. Oh. It was somewhere in this beautiful canopy here. So the good news is, all 3 of those survived the winter. This little guy, the second smaller apple air layer, did not survive the winter. Kind of no surprise there. And they all looked healthy. The plum in particular went crazy and started flowering, which is crazy because it had only just begun to flower on the main tree itself this year for the first time since I've owned it. The apple was covered in all new buds and was looking like it was going to just leaf out all over that nice thick trunk. And the Japanese maple, it appeared to have lost a lot of the terminal buds on the ends of its branching, but still had plenty where it seemed like it was going to push through in the spring and be fine. So that brings us to today. Sorry for the background shit. I'm kind of a hoarder. So let's start with the apple. And as you can see, it did. And it's kind of a bummer because again, it had buds all over it. And you can still see, if you look, little dead, dried up, desiccated, dried up, desiccated buds all over the stem if you really look. I think what happened was the aphids got to it and attacked every one of those emerging buds, and I just didn't notice it. The aphids were particularly bad this year. Let's take a look at what we got for roots. Yeah. I mean, it could have just been that it didn't like sitting in the wet sphagnum all the time. But like I said, it pushed through and it pushed new growth in the spring, so I was really hoping this guy would be okay. But nay. As for the plum, you know, boy went crazy. You can see the branch that I cut off. And this stuff, if you follow my hand, this is all new growth from the spring. All of these long shoots, all completely new growth. Unreal. And it flowered, like I said, and it's rooting right through the pot. So next year, I'm gonna have to do something about this guy. I'm gonna have to put him in a proper pot and cut back some of this crazy growth, and maybe even think about styling it a little bit, or at least for the structure, the main structure. So that's a win. Japanese maple. Even though I was concerned about a lot of the terminal buds suddenly being missing, I mean, it almost seemed like a mouse chewed half of them off. In spite of that, it pushed all sorts of new growth. The leaves are a little sunburned, as are all of my trees right now. When that first heat wave hit, it really sort of rocked all the trees a little bit. You know, we've got some pest damage, some wind damage. But just to give you an idea of the new growth that it pushed, here's a branch right here. This entire shoot is all this year's growth. And just way too early to be even talking about this, but I think what I'm going to do with this tree, but I'm going to get rid of all of that. Can you see? And go full literati on this guy. And then I'll maybe train something like that as the new leader downward. So it actually is one of those literatis that sort of comes up and then doubles back down on itself somehow and has a pad sort of in this area here. So it'll come up and then back down. Again, maybe too early to be even thinking about that, But honestly, I'm just happy that they all, well, that 2 of them lived. So that's last year's air layers. But we have an air layer this year. Come on.
Let's go check out our huge stone. Mommy.
Our sheep layers. Okay, so back in May, maybe only a week or 2 after I took all those Dawn Redwood cuttings, here's a link to that masterpiece of a video. I started what I would call a 2-for-1 air layer from the same tree. So the main trunk on the right here was actually a competing leader to the main trunk of the tree, so I had no problem losing that. And the branch on the left actually had great movement to it. The problem was that there wasn't enough room to put 2 separate air layers side by side, so, well, you see where I'm going. We went and we fucking chooched up a onesie. Yep, I just invented that term. So spoiler alert, it worked.
Holy cow.
Or at least one of them did. I mean, who knows what's going on in that root ball.
Look at those roots.
Oh
See 'em?
yeah, it worked. Oh yeah. Oh, it worked. Oh my god.
No.
Oh,
All right,
God,
let's
it
cut
worked.
them off.
Oh yeah.
And put them in a pot.
So you know the rest. Well, you sort of know the rest. I sawed it off, obviously. But I sawed it off below with the branch split. So it was all still intact. It was all still one piece. Once on the ground, I proceeded to remove the rest of the wrapping, but rather than untangle all the moss and the roots and cut it into 2 separate air layers, I just, well, I chickened out. And I left it all together as one piece. I guarantee that I will regret that one day. But that day, my several friends, is not today. Anyway, after I trimmed off a bunch of branches that I knew I wouldn't want in the future, which I've done with my previous air layers, and it seemed to work fine, though who really knows what killed those apple trees. But really, I was just looking to get rid of those low branches, long branches, and obviously I had to bring the height down with a bit of a trunk chop. There you go. Foot for scale. And after that, we just went full chan and soaked a bunch of sphagnum moss. And the air layers we potted in 100% sphagnum, which is exactly what I did last year. My girl is putting the last of the sphagnum moss in, topping it off. I'm going to top that off with some bonsai soil too. And what I'm expecting to happen is to separate these 2 at some point into that tree and this tree. I'm hoping that it buds. Maybe I should just cut this whole thing off, but I want it to bud somewhere around here to form a new leader. I don't mind having a little crook in the trunk. Hey, don't pull the leaves off. But that should be a good little tree. We're gonna go put it in the shade, and hopefully it'll make it through the winter.
Pete, why are these branches all tangled up?
That's how they grow. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that the tree? Okay, no more water in there. We done with so much water.